Hey guys, what's going on? Gonna do another kind of Delta theory video today. I just wanted to say I'm super appreciative of all the support I've been getting on these videos. That first Delta video I pushed out, I think has 1,500 views now, and I've got over 50 subscribers just from that video. So I'm really, like I said, I'm just really appreciative that people are watching them and at least finding some sort of value out of them, because I've been having a lot of fun making them, and they're kind of low effort in the sense I'm just talking, and I figured I'm going to keep doing them just over the Google Maps, just so I can kind of float around and kind of look at different spots. But I don't know if people rather just look at me while I talk about it or whatever. You guys can just let me know in the comments. But what we're going to talk about today is just kind of wouldn't necessarily be a theory, but just more of a concept. But that's kind of the title that I'm running with these videos now. It's called Hard Bottom. And I think the title of this is probably going to be something like Hard Bottom Holes or Hard Bottom Hogs or something silly like that. But basically, hard bottom in the Delta. What does that mean? So we'll kind of just break that down first. In the Delta, right, you have a bunch of different types of bottom. You have mud, you have sand, you have rock, you have, I don't know, like maybe an offshore rock pile of some kind. Like there's a bunch of different bottom compositions. Now, you hear this a lot, and this is kind of what some of these next couple of videos are going to try and like harp on a little bit. People talk about, oh my God, the whole Delta looks the same. Everywhere looks good. I don't understand why fish are one place and they're not the other place, blah, 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 blah. That's kind of going to be, this is one of the things that you can look for when you're out here, and that's going to be that hard bottom concept and specifically the hard bottom hole. So we'll kind of just run through an example. So let's say we'll start with something super basic. So you're on a stretch of rock wall, okay? Just a rock bank. There's this stuff, over the whole Delta, and there's the trough. What is the trough? So the trough is an area on the rocks that is in between the weed edge and the rocks themselves. So on high tide, for example, maybe you have like a 4-foot high tide. This trough could be pretty big. Might be like 3 feet across. Might be pretty deep. Might be 3 feet deep. And as that water starts to drain out, that trough is going to get smaller. And this is something that, if you fish the Delta, you know about it, but I'll just explain it to people that don't know, right? But if you're fishing on a high tide, the trough's a great place to fish because the fish will sit in that trough. They'll look up river and they'll wait for stuff to come down. So like something super popular is they'll flip Senkos into the trough, or they'll throw a crankbait in the trough or a topwater or whatever. There's just a lot of fish there. So it's always a good place to try. Now, there isn't a trough everywhere on the Delta. Now, granted, it has to usually be on a rock wall like I just explained. Sometimes you can find them on other types of banks and islands depending on the grass, but you have to look for the correct trough, because you'll find banks that just do not have a trough. You'll find banks that maybe the trough isn't big enough, different variables. And that's going to be one of those things that is going to separate a good spot from a bad spot, right? So if you can find a trough that has appropriate depth, and you can find a trough that, has good water, clarity, and the width is correct between the grass and the actual trough, so you can effectively fish it. All those things are important to having a trough that you can actually fish and is going to hold fish, because if there isn't water there, then there's not going to be fishing there, because they're not going to just be having their backs out of the water. It's kind of dangerous for them or whatnot. So building on that hard bottom, that is a form of hard bottom, right? The rocks are continuing into the water. They haven't hit the grass yet, and the fish are basically using that as a hard bottom area, a hole, right, to associate themselves to the grass edge and to feed, to ambush. So the next style of hole can be applied to, a lot of times you'll see them in kind of like a pond setting. So maybe, and what I mean by pond is like a flooded pond, like Frank's Track, Little Frank's, Mandeville, Mildred, yada, yada, yada. So we'll come down here to Mandeville. We'll talk about it here. So hard bottom hole. Let's say you're fishing in Mandeville. You're going to run over to the northwest corner. I don't really fish in here a lot, so I'm going to pretend to act like I know about where all the areas are in this place. But a lot of times in the springtime, you can come look on the edges of the bank, and you'll find these tan spots. And what those tan spots are they're hard bottom, and it's usually like a sand-ish material or just super hard packed dirt, and bass like to spawn on hard bottom. So that can be a really key thing to look for. Now, if you have a lot of grass in this area, finding those random hard bottom spots, those holes, are going to play more of a factor because they're more isolated. Now, granted, if you go down a bank and there's just no grass and it's all hard bottom, that could be good, but that's not going to be as good as an anomaly. Anomalies control the delta. If you can find something that is different, that is where a lot of those big fish are going to be. And there is no really way to just be like, hey, this area has a bunch of hard bottom in it, come over here and find all the fish. Hard bottom holes are changing constantly because of grass. When grass grows, the hard bottom gets covered, or it could move year from year or whatnot. And there's definitely banks where hey, I find hard bottom here every year, and for whatever reason, it continually reoccurs. Now, granted, maybe the holes move 10 or 20 yards left or right or whatnot, but that general area kind of holds those holes. And that can be a concept for the spring, right? If you're a bass, you're not going to lay your eggs on a bunch of grass and have them blow away. You need that hard bottom area. So something that a lot of guys do every year when they fish tournaments is they'll have like a drop shot, 7-inch Senko, a flipping bait, and they'll throw casts, little pitches all day into all these hard bottom hole areas, and eventually you're going to land on top of an 8-pounder that's sitting on a bed, and you're going to catch them. And it's kind of nice because one of the concepts that one of my buddies instilled in me a long time ago was the importance of understanding low tide and not being afraid of low tide. Low tide is going to show you where these holes are, and you might not necessarily see them as easily as on high tide, but you're at least going to know where they are and be able to kind of blind cast into those areas. So that is kind of the most like spring applicable version of a hard bottom hole, or just hard bottom in general, and the importance of it. We'll kind of jump around to maybe like a summer kind of situation. We'll just hop over here. This isn't the greatest example, but we'll just kind of run with it. So you have current that comes around a point on the delta. Now, because the current comes both ways, this isn't always going to be how it is, just because if you had a lake, for example, and you kind of knew that current generally always came from one direction, whether that be from wind or whatnot, generally speaking, there'd be a side of the point that was flatter and a side of the point that'd be steeper. And there's times like this where it sets up like this in the delta, and it really comes down to, like what I said earlier, you got to be out on low tide, and you got to be looking for these kind of things. And we talk about anomalies, like I said earlier, you really have to have your eyes peeled out here, and you have to pay attention to what you're looking at. If you just go burning down the bank, casting away, and just like drinking a beer or whatever people are doing, you're not going to be picking up on these subtleties, versus if you kind of, at least maybe now you know about this, maybe you didn't know about this concept before, you can kind of keep your eyes peeled and look for it. So building off what I was saying, you have current that comes around this point here. A lot of times, if let's just say it's sand or hard bottom, one of these sides will kind of have like a sandy shelf or like a sandy edge to it. And that's just from that tide just continually ripping around and eroding the side. And a lot of times you'll see that on islands too. Islands have sand a lot of the times as well. And if you can find one of those areas that has those hard bottoms, especially in the summertime and deeper in the summertime, like on one of these points, you'll find delta fish that are using that hard bottom similarly to how they are in the spring. They're just hanging out on it, similar to like something in a lake. Maybe you have like a gravel patch, you have a ledge, you have some sort of like offshore anomaly that the fish are associating to, that you'd be fishing for like spotted bass or something. And a lot of guys fish like 5 to 0 feet, on the delta all year long, and that's all they ever do. And you're going to catch fish like that. That's fine, but sometimes you got to open up your mind a little bit and realize that there are fish that use deep water in the delta. The deepest fish that I've caught in the delta so far was in 29 feet of water, and I caught it on the end of a sandy point on a Tokyo rig, actually, with a half ounce waist. So you could just call it like a jig. Basically like a jig or a Texas rig creature bait is essentially what I was throwing. And a pretty solid fish, like a 5-pounder, which is kind of crazy. I couldn't even believe it, to be honest with you. But since then, I've caught quite a few fish in deeper water. And those fish were associated to that hard bottom hole or edge or whatever you want to call it. So that's kind of another way that you can apply that same hard bottom concept. So the last kind of variation, I suppose, of the hard bottom that we can touch on, I'm trying to think of an area that has a lot of trees in it. I don't know. Let me see here. Just so we can kind of get an example. Maybe somewhere down south. I don't know. I fish more up north. Let's just go to some random bank up here that has trees on it. I know this one's got some overhanging trees over here. So you got overhanging trees. This spot isn't an excellent example just because there's a lot of current in this particular area. So take that with what you want. But so you have shade from trees. That's really what I want you guys to think about. The shade from the trees is going to create a hole. Now, it might not always be hard bottom, and a lot of times it will be. You have grass that grows during the summer. There's grass all over the place in the Delta. Well, under a lot of these shady trees, you'll find a hole, and it'll be like a big bowl. It doesn't have to be like huge. Sometimes it's only like a 2 by 2 foot little circle, or maybe it's a pretty expansive area. Maybe it's a couple yards long. The fish will sit in these holes under the trees in the shade, and they'll use that as an ambush area. So like you could skip a Senko, you could skip a frog, you could flip into those areas, right? And those fish are going to be sitting in those holes. And that's a year-round pattern, that there's going to be fish associated to shade and fish associated to those holes and those hard bottom areas. And the last kind of thing that we'll talk about, since I'm kind of remembering it, is just in regards to some of those depressions and those holes, is let's just find like a flat, like anything really, like over here. So this is like a big old flat on BMW or BNW, just continues down this edge, super shallow. You're going to have grass all over this in the summertime, just grass all over the place. I mean, you could kind of see it here where it's popping up. Those same hard bottom hole concepts are going to apply here, right? So if you're a bass and you're on a 100-yard grass flat that is like a consistent depth of 3 feet, for example, you're going to have depressions in this grass throughout the flat. And those depressions might quite literally go to the bottom and be a hard bottom hole, or they might manifest themselves in a different way and just be a depression in the grass. So the fish is still sitting on top of grass, but it's just a slightly deeper hole. And that's that anomaly, that needle in the haystack that you would need to look for. And that is a little bit more difficult. That could be something that, like I said, you paid a lot of attention on low tide, and then you came back on the high tide, you remembered where those holes were, and then you blind casted those with a whopper plopper or spinner bait or swim bait or whatever it is you're throwing, right? Senko. I mean, anything honestly works. And you're going to have fish come out of those holes. So something you could do in the summertime is, let's say you're going on this bank and you're burning a buzzbait. You get a giant blow up, and maybe you catch the fish, maybe you don't. I'd go poke your head over there and look. And I bet you 9 times out of 10, that area you got that bite, there's going to be a dark spot. And what is darkness associated with? The deeper water via a hole in the grass. So we'll kind of make this a quick video. That's kind of the points I wanted to touch on, right? So you got hard bottom via trough. You have hard bottom via underneath shade, hard bottom depression on a flat with grass, or hard bottom holes just inside of a pond or kind of an area with slower moving water. So those are all things to pay attention to. They play all year long. I'd say maybe they're more of a factor in the spring and the summertime because, I mean, the troughs all the time, but just the whole spring, summer, there's more grass, right? Winter, fall, the grass is either dying or there's just no grass or less grass because it's cold. There's not going to be as many holes because there's not as many grass. So coming into the spring right now, coming into the summer months, those can be some things that you can kind of pay attention to, experiment with, realize that not everywhere you find holes is going to be great, but if you're consistently going down banks this spring that are just solid walls of grass, probably not great if you're trying to target spawning fish. But now let's say you hop in some oxbow area and you find, you know, big channel swing and there's a nice little trough coming in there, like that would be something I pay attention to. And if you find an area that looks like it's setting up really good, but you just don't see any fish there yet, that goes back to that concept that we talked about in other videos where you need to hit that spot low, high, mid-tide, incoming, outcoming until you find those fish. It could also be time of day, especially in the springtime. That water temp starts to raise in the afternoon. Those fish start to feel the warmth. They pull up onto the bank. It could be one of those things where you go down the bank at 8 a.m., you catch nothing, and you come down it at 4 o'clock in the afternoon after the sun's been beaten down and that water temp's 58 degrees instead of 55, and you absolutely destroy them. So anyway, like I said, appreciate everybody watching. If you guys have anything that you can think about, maybe we can talk about. Like I said, these videos are doing good right now, so I'm going to try and keep kind of pushing out similar stuff as I come up with ideas, but appreciate everybody's support. Please like, comment, subscribe, and leave me a comment. I will talk to you guys soon. Thank you. Bye.